Hi everyone, and welcome to this lecture on fish and omega fatty acids. Should I consume them? Okay, so when we talk about fatty acids, what we're talking about first of all are the essential fatty acids. To describe what an omega fatty acid is the location of the double bond is always going to be key. So the way we do this is we look at the alpha or omega end of a fatty acid. So if we look at the alpha end is over here. So this is where the fatty acid starts. And then the omega end is on this side. So all we have to do is count back the amount of carbons back and it will tell us which fatty acid number it is or omega fatty acid number to where the double bond is. And this is what a double bond looks like here. So if we count back on here, we notice there's 9 carbon molecules until we get to here. This makes this an omega-9 fatty acid. So that's how we would describe this fatty acid for us. So when we understand that omega-3 would actually be blocked here, and omega-6 would be blocked up here, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, here's what to keep in mind. Why do we care about omega fatty acids to begin with? Well, they're anticoagulants or procoagulants to begin with. That's what the omega-3s and omega-6s do for you. They're either going to help make those coagulations or blood clots you need, or they're going to help break them down. The omega-3s help break them down. The omega-6s help put them in place. If you don't have those, you can't do this process properly, and as a result, cardiovascular disease, other problems can result. Now, the thing to keep in mind is when we think about omega-3s, for example, even on the image we see on the upper right-hand side, from a supplement bottle, it says it gives you the omega-3, 6, and 9s. Well, in reality, your body can make omega-9 fatty acids on its own. It has the enzymes to do that. It can make any omega fatty acid it wants, except for omega-3 and omega-6. We don't have the enzymes to do that. No vertebrate does, okay? So that means we need to consume those from other sources. In our case, where we usually get it from is fish, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But obviously, with this idea, then, they do a lot of functions in our bodies we described. They help with immune function. They help with your vision. They build the cell membrane for you. They make hormone-like compounds and many other things. So we do need omega-3s and omega-6s in our diet in different ways. We don't need them every day, but we definitely need them there. So if we're going to consume our omega-3s and omega-6s from fish, which fish should we be aiming for? The fish that we have declared over and over again, and there's good consensus on this, is cold water fish. So on your right-hand side, you see a list of 11 different fish and even an article from the U.S. News. And here it describes 3 different cold water fish that are very good to get your omega-3s and omega-6s from. Things like salmon, char, sardines. Sardines are great because if they're small, you consume the whole thing, and you also get calcium at the same time. Anchovies, the same thing, calcium, omega-3s and omega-6s in one fell swoop, excellent. Oysters help, halibut, mussels, all great for your omega-3s and omega-6s. But at the same time, we do have to be careful with how we consume our omega-3s and omega-6s when it comes for fish and the consumption of what we pick out of, different water sources. And the reason behind this is because, as we know, mercury content. Well, how did mercury get into fish to begin with? It came from us, all right? So we have fossil fuel burning, we have all these incinerators. Those go up into the atmosphere or they run down a water stream and they make their way to water where they've been aggregating or building up in quantities over the last 10s and 20s and 30s, 50s, 100 years. So now we have mercury in the water. At the same time, that mercury is consumed by bacteria, which then eventually make their way into fish. And so that's what the top left-hand picture shows for us. And on the bottom left-hand picture, what we see here is all these small things consume the mercury, but then smaller fish consume those, and then larger fish consume those small fish, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it causes what we call bioaccumulation. So as they consume more and more fish, they're going to accumulate that mercury in their bodies as well. And then we're eventually going to eat those fish, and then we're going to bioaccumulate it as well in our bodies. So on the right-hand side, you can see on the bottom, there's 2 jokes there on the top. They're nice cartoons to look at. But in reality, the mercury risk, that's a risk is not going to outweigh the benefit, which is those omega-3s and omega-6s. What we have to do is make sure what we consume are small fish, fish that don't consume a lot of other fish. They're going to bioaccumulate less. So we can see here from DOH from Washington, on the left-hand side of that bottom right-hand picture, we can see 2 to 3 meals per week. It's okay to eat any of those fish, like catfish, anchovies, salmon. These are all small fish, okay? That's what you're seeing there. But when you go to larger fish, sea bass, even mahi-mahi, tuna especially, and we'll talk about tuna in a few slides, they're going to have more mercury. Lobster, more mercury in it. And the fish to avoid are those big fish that consume a lot of fish. Mackerel, marlin, shark, swordfish, tuna steak. You see tuna steak, you see swordfish commonly in marketplaces and fish markets in the United States. They should be avoided, eat rarely, if at all. if pregnant, if nursing children, they should never consume any of those fish. And for the rest of us, even though you might say it's a delicacy, in reality, we shouldn't be consuming them either. They're in the no-no list. So I mentioned tuna. You might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, what's wrong with tuna? Well, the FDA backs this idea up. If we look at the FDA website, which we see here through a screenshot, they'll tell you as you go down, eat a minor amount of tuna every single week. You should be consuming very little of that, maybe only a few times a month. And why is that? Comes back to that mercury, okay? So the bioaccumulation is going to happen there. The type of mercury that's being consumed in this case is called methylmercury. It can go through the gastrointestinal tract or your small intestine and make its way into your blood supply. And we can see again the big players, swordfish, shark, king mackerel, tilefish, but also albacore tuna. All right, other tuna is lower in mercury. The real key here is, and you can see this nice chart on the right-hand side, fish you buy versus fish you catch, and it shows the mercury level for you. When you go into a fish market, go ahead and type in the fish you're about to buy and just type in mercury, and it will tell you immediately through Google or whatever you use for your searching, something will pop up to tell you how much mercury is there and whether you should consume it and how often you should consume it. But keep in mind the benefit of consuming omega-3s and omega-6s outweighs the risk of mercury, especially if you stay in those low categories. So let's focus on tuna for a second then. So why is tuna so high? Well, look at these images. Those are images of tuna right there, all right? Tuna's a big fish. People think it's a small thing. It's a very large fish. So tuna is consuming a lot of other fish, and as a result, it's bioaccumulating a lot as well. So on the top right-hand side, we can see this is frozen tuna being broken down. On the bottom, somebody caught a huge tuna. It's a big fish, so that's why it gets so much mercury in it. If you like tuna, which we all do, we all like tuna fish sandwiches if you consume fish, here's a good option for you instead of doing that. Skipjack wild tuna. Wild caught is important. Pole caught is important also when it comes to mercury content. And skipjack is the type of tuna. Tuna steaks, always a bad idea. Albacore tuna, bad idea. If you go with skipjack, it's going to have everything you want. It's delicious. The protein is there, but it's naturally low in mercury. It doesn't mean, again, you should be consuming it every day, but it's the lower mercury content as far as tuna go. You will pay a little bit more for this, but the difference is you're going to get all the benefit and much less risk. Now, along with that, we can also talk about PCBs. PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls. Polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, are things we also find in our water supply. They're not readily broken down. They stay there for eons, all right? They've been demonstrated to cause cancer. They affect the immune system, reproductive system, nervous system, and endocrine system. We obviously want to avoid these things. Why can't we do it? So, for example, Manhattanville College is located in the northeast of the United States, right on the Hudson River almost. Well, it turns out if you back up about 50 or 60 years ago, a GE, General Electric manufacturing facility, was about 100 miles up of where Manhattanville College is located nowadays, and they were dumping PCBs into the water. So again, when you go in and you're going to consume a fish, if you're going to catch fish, you got to be careful about the source, because again, when you're more up in the Hudson River, for example, there's going to be more PCBs present. This sort of idea is not only stuck to the Hudson River. This happens internationally, nationally. A lot of times, especially in the past, companies and manufacturers said, oh, I'm going to dump my waste directly into a water source. In this case, GE dumped 1.3 million pounds of PCBs into the Hudson River. Remember, this causes cancer, right? It affects the immune system. So be careful, again, if you're going out to catch fish. Just because you caught a fish doesn't mean it's actually safe to consume it. You might say to yourself, well, I want the omega-3s and omega-6s, but I don't want to do it with consuming fish. I'm going to do it through fish oil. Well, it might be useful for people that don't consume fish, but at the same time, it really should be limited to those people that have bleeding disorders, anticipate surgery, have the advice from a physician. It's not, these supplements are actually not made for everybody. They'll sell it to you, but they're not actually made to be consumed, all right? So the better idea is to get it directly from fish. One of the other problems with this is obviously with fish oil, they are, conglomerating, putting together lots of different fish into one oil. And so again, mercury content may be higher. Even if they say they purify or remove the mercury, it might be higher for you. So fish oil is not a dietary supplement. Remember, it's not regulated by the FDA. Even though it says it removes contaminants, who says that? Who is the authority that did that test? We don't know. And so because of this, we think whole fish is thought to have greater benefits than the fish oil supplements. It's a good protein source. It's good for you as long as you consume the right type of fish and in moderation. And of course, if you want to stick with a supplement, keep in mind, every vertebrate can't make omega-3s and omega-6s. This also applies to fish. Fish are not making their own omega-3s and omega-6s. They're getting it from algae. So instead, you could also get your supplement from algae for omega-3s. And the idea with this obviously is lower down in the food chain, less bioaccumulation if you're going to take that route. But again, I highly encourage you instead to go with whole fish. So that's it for this lecture. I hope you learned a little bit about omega-3s, omega-6s, fish consumption, which fish to consume, and which ones to watch out for. Looking forward to seeing you in the next lecture.